Okay, we are live and the timer has started. Daniel just told me that we're not supposed to clap when everybody else is clapping.
Let's clap for ourselves.
I thought it's encouraging. It's going to be a good interview. So, Daniel Epstein, CEO of Unreasonable Group. We're going to start really easy and then we're going to get harder and harder.
Good, yeah.
So just warm you up a little bit.
Okay.
How much wine have you had tonight?
None.
Okay. So the fire's going, so we're okay. So let's start with this. I think probably everybody in this room knows you, but perhaps not everybody online knows you. What made you start Unreasonable? Where did it come from?
It's not that easy.
I know. Let's find out.
I was be like, what's your dog's name? Kaya.
I know that one.
Well, so I think we don't have a ton of time, and so I'm going to make it quick. But I do want to make a comment, which is, I think almost all founders' stories they're oversimplified, right? Because there's so much more complexity and there's so much more of a roller coaster. But if I had to, in hindsight, pinpoint what happened, it was really my freshman year of university. I had this really awkward experience where when you're 18, you go to university, everybody asks you, what do you want to be? And I would tell people that I really wanted to be an entrepreneur. And everybody would say, well, what's your great idea? You want to be an entrepreneur? And I never had an idea. It was just like incredibly awkward, right? I had absolutely nothing. And I realized, end of my first semester, I was journaling. And I ended up studying philosophy. And I used to write every night in my journal. And I wrote in my journal, I was trying to think of the idea. Is it going to be social media? Probably would have been smart. At that point in time, is it going to be like e-commerce? Is it going to be brick and mortar, an apparel company? I have no idea. And then I wrote out kind of the fundamentals. I said, well, as entrepreneurs, we design solutions to problem sets. And I wrote on the next line, I can choose what problem sets I want to solve. And I wrote on the next line, I'm only going to work on problem sets worthy of my life's work. In essence, I could kind of give a damn if I'm 18 years old or not. The only thing I know about entrepreneurship is that it's really fucking hard, right? And the odds are stacked against you. And so I think I figured at a pretty young age that if I'm going to leverage my relationships, my equity, my reputation, my sleep into starting something, why not work on a company that if we're successful, we bend history in the right direction? It's just more exciting. It's just more compelling. And I started to get really addicted with this belief that you could leverage for-profit business models to solve nonprofit problems. Going down that course, worked on 3 startups throughout university. And that whole time when I was journaling, I used to write that I felt like a misfit. That was the word. I use that adjective all the time. And it was because I didn't know who to hang out with. Right? And this is overgeneralizing, but I'd go to the kind of nonprofit world, and I felt like a misfit because I used to even say, I'm a capitalist. And I actually think greed is a horrible thing. I don't think it's good. Mm-hmm. But the way I'd frame it is I think profits are best driver for ingenuity in markets for scale. And so I'd go to the for-profit sector thinking, well, they get that. I was a total misfit because I actually don't care about profit at all. In and of itself, it's worthless to me. But insofar as it is a driver towards impact at scale, I think it's the most powerful tool. But the thing I care about is solving the problem at scale. And so overgeneralizing, oversimplifying, but the genesis of Unreasonable was largely selfish. And it was feeling like a misfit and really wanted to seek refuge amongst fellow misfits, entrepreneurs like the ones in this room who are, I would say, naive enough, foolhardy enough is probably a better word, to think, we can solve the world's hardest problems, full stop, right? You can change the world. But they're so hell-bent and so maniacally focused on doing it that they're never going to stop anything short of that. And I didn't feel like that community existed. Mm-hmm. I would have been in this if I could have gotten into it and it existed, but it didn't. And so, did the next best thing, which is, with best friends at the time, started something that didn't exist. So in essence, we could participate in it. I think the irony is a lot of our cohorts, a lot of our programs, I would never qualify. Mm-hmm. But to be able to be in the program, let alone as a mentor, especially nowhere in that supply chain. And so it's really humbling. This idea that you stand on the shoulders of giants. Our whole team at Unreasonable, that's our job. Yeah. And so in that sense, it was something that I got really addicted to. Once I saw that, once the community came together and the power of that community amongst each other, and just feeling like I could seek refuge within it.
Well, I love that concept of misfits. I also love the concept of giants. I mean, your team is quite mythical. They are often, even if they are shorter, they are enormous.
You say shorter?
If
Yeah, I was like, we're not
shorter,
giants. I don't know. I don't know who you're referring to.
You can
Ashok's kind
achieve
of tall.
a huge amount. No, it's incredibly impressive. And I also like the fact that you kind of reference refuge, finding refuge amongst others because you build communities. But it reminds me of a conversation I had this morning with Liz Young. Liz Young, your wonderful assistant, who has managed some very, very trying people in the past, but nobody as trying as you.
Whoa, is that what you said? You had really hard bosses.
Let me explain, just to make sure that Liz can go home comfortably tonight.
I love that. That's great.
So Liz said that you're one of the hardest people because you don't need her. Because you are an entrepreneur and you are self-sufficient.
I do need Liz.
And
What are you talking
she
about?
books you hotels and you still sleep at the airport.
That's true. That happens.
So, so 2 questions for you, and then I will make sure to salvage Liz's reputation. The first is, where is the most unreasonable place that you have slept? And the second is... Sober. In any state, at any time. And then the second part of my question is really for Liz's reputation, because I'm feeling slightly hard.
You don't.
You know, we had a lovely question. One of our mentors here, Ty, said to her tonight at dinner, he said to her, what is Daniel's greatest attribute? And she said, the way he can change people's minds. And I wanted to know if you agreed with that.
It's kind of scary, isn't it?
And if she's just saying that so I can use it in this context and get you to go to hotels instead of sleeping in hotels.
Yeah. So, craziest place I've ever slept. It's a really funny question. I can't think of one place. I will share, this is a startup story. So Will Butler, if Will...
Are you avoiding the question?
No, I'm answering it, I promise. Where's Will? Is he not in the room? He's not in the room. That's okay. In spirit, he's here. So Will was one of the co-founders of a company we later rebranded to Unreasonable Adventures, and we were working with ecotourism guides all around the world to use ecotourism as a tool for sustainable development. But how we launched it was we cycled from Canada down to Mexico along the coast, and they didn't know, the team did. At this time, I think Will was compensated $500 a month for full-time employment, and what him. Yeah, it's illegal, definitely. And what him and the other team members, kind of co-founders on the bike trip, didn't know is I set a rule. When we got up to Vancouver, we're going to cycle down, which is we can never pay for housing for the entire trip. And so we had, a 70-day bike trip. And we were meeting with guides. We met with about 150 partners, signed about 90%. But our rule is we can never pay for sleeping. And so we would bike up to people's front doors. And it'd be like 10 p.m. and we're like sweaty and disgusted. We just biked 100 miles kind of thing. And we'd get with backpacks and everything. And we'd knock on the door, they open the door. And the line that always worked is I'd say, hey, look, I know this sounds really silly. And silly is such a disarming word. We talked about that actually at dinner tonight. I was like, but, we're on a bike trip right now. We're launching a company. We're cycling around the coast. And I know this sounds silly, but your lawn looks so comfortable. Like, do you mind if we camp out on your lawn? And literally, and I didn't have a tent. I refused to have. I was really stubborn. I refused to have a tent. So I had a half of a blue tarp, but I cut it in half because there's too much to pack as the full tarp. And so if it rained, I'd put the tarp on top of me, and if it was if it wasn't raining, I'd put the tarp underneath me. I'd sleep on it. I had no sleeping pad, and so for about almost 3 months, I slept outside on people's lawns. And what's amazing about this
is that you made everybody else do it too.
Yeah, they had tents. So when it was really storming, obviously I cuddled with Will, and he very begrudgingly let me in his tent. But what was amazing about that is, that seemed like a crazy idea. I never asked anybody to ever sleep on their lawn, and a lot of people would invite you in, right? Half of them probably insisted that we come and they cooked dinner and all that stuff. And kind of everybody was open to it, and we realized that, people are a lot more generous than I think we give them credit for. And it's because we never ask, because we don't assume that. And we were on this bike trip. We went to some biker bar just to stop and get some snacks. And but all these big guys on motorcycles, this really big guy. And he came up to us. He asked us all about the trip. He's really excited. And Will's telling him, yeah, we've asked 70 people to sleep at their places. They've all let us crash on their lawn or whatever and take care of us. And the guy goes, man, that's that reminds me of what America used to be like. Okay. He's like, I really wish it was like that still. And we're like, we just told you we just did it, right? But like we're like hard coded to believe don't trust strangers, right? Like we put up fences, but they're not real, and so there's a lot of weird places that I ended up sleeping on that trip. Yeah. But I can't pick out one. And maybe this gets to convincing people to your second question. I don't know.
I think you might have done pretty well. 70 lawns, not bad.
One person said no. It's actually really funny. So it was. So we knock on the door. It's me, Will, and then this guy, Elliot Bates. He's really strong. He's like a big. He looks like Iceman from Top Gun.
Yeah.
Yeah. It looks just like him. Yeah. He does. He's really. Yeah. But so it's at night, right? And we roll up. We knock on the door. She opens up, and she's like a little bit intimidated. There's just like 3 guys there. And we say, "Hey, I know this sounds silly, but can we sleep on your lawn?" And she's like, "You know what?" She's like, "Guys, I feel really uncomfortable with that because I don't know you, and my husband's not here right now, and it just doesn't feel safe." And then we're like, "You know what? That's fine. We totally respect that." But we're like, "But you shouldn't tell a bunch of guys."
You don't feel safe.
We're like, "Do you want us to camp out? Like, we'll protect you?" And she said no, so we didn't. But that was the only no the entire time. And so to this point of what was the superpower you said?
I didn't ask for one, but let's go for it.
No, you said you had like what was the superpower or the strength or
what would you consider that your attribute? And I think it is.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
But let's move in that territory because I think this is a perfect segue on. So you talked about somebody said Will was in the room spiritually, and then you also talked about the full moon, or at least I heard you talk about the full moon. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you like to do with regards to full moons? Perhaps online or offline, and what that might mean when people.
I have no idea what are you talking about.
So there have been rumors going around that sometimes you like to expose other people to different types of moons.
Yeah, got it.
Is that a true rumor?
So you have to. So I'm a younger brother of 3, and yeah.
I think we just got another minute on the clock, by the way, for that question.
And. Yeah, no. We went out. We did a brother trip in the Grand Canyon. I don't know when this was. I was probably like 20 or so. Mm-hmm. And my oldest brother, his name's Josh. I hope he's watching this. And so we're all out there. And he really wanted to take a shot. And it's down the Grand Canyon. And it's like the stunning, 6,000 foot vertical cliffs all the way down to the bottom. And so he really wanted to take a photo. And then he really wanted to get naked for the photo. And we're like, that's pretty weird, Josh, but okay. And so we snapped the shot. And I looked at it. I was like, that's the coolest photo I think I've ever seen. And so me and my brothers, we had this competition who could get the best kind of butt shot from anywhere in the world. I gave that up like 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah?
Shoke's like, no, he didn't. I think I did. Yeah.
They're still circulating.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but on that note, you did bring up superpower, and I feel like that's too easy. What's your spiritual animal?
Whoa. I like in the genuine sense, like genuinely.
I mean, I think it's always genuine when you talk about your spirit animal.
Yeah.
What would it be like? Something that you'd aspire to? Come on.
No. It's probably some type of really happy dog.
Happy dog.
And it sounds cheesy, but it's true because I think that dogs get energy from being around other dogs or other people. So they love like the presence of community. I think that they're like ridiculously optimistic, and I get really excited all the time. So actually, Jeff Hoffman and I, we were talking about this yesterday about like his retrievers.
Jeff, who's here as a mentor.
Yeah, is Jeff here? No, I think he had to leave.
Just had to leave, exactly.
But we were talking about his retrievers, and he said, yeah, it's like my dog loves me so much, and I go to the bathroom, and then I come back, and my dog's like, oh, you're back, you made it, this is amazing, I can't believe you did it. And I think that, like, like, you're back, like, I think, like, I get really excited when I see people, like, I love being around, and I'm just really optimistic, and so I think it would be that. I'm probably, like, pretty hard to train. In that sense. So that too. I love running. All those things.
Saliva, big ears flopping around, all those things are
decently.
But now at least I can put things together while your PowerPoints always have puppies in them.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got this really good story about it being part of a marketing class, but actually the truth is it's your spirit animal.
It's just what I want
coming
to be.
through. Mm-hmm. I love it. Yeah. Okay, so with that in mind, so dogs, there are cartoon dogs, there are other types of dogs. Are there people that you admire? Or is it just dogs that you want to be like?
Yeah. I love this interview. It's amazing, Emily. So sincere, but it's like... yeah, no, I love it. Yeah.
You didn't want to see the questions
No,
at the time?
no, it's great. I think it's a very good question, though, in that sense. There are attributes of most people who I meet that I really admire. There are very few people who I don't admire. Like, very few, once I get to know them. There's always something that I'm like, wow, that's amazing. I wish I could be more like that. Or, like, I love that. I want to learn from that. Is there anybody I, like, idolize or look up to? Not really. I've never had that. And I don't know why, but there are attributes of a lot of people that I do really admire and look up to. I think if there's anybody, it would probably be my grandpa.
Okay.
He's my dad's dad.
Okay.
He and the thing that I really, because I got asked this in high school.
Yeah.
Right. Somebody write an essay about somebody you look up to, and I was like, I don't really look up to anybody. I kind of look up to everybody, but there's no one I want to like.
I'm picturing this
emulate.
Frankenstein that's maybe got your grandfather's head on it
Yeah.
and bits and pieces of other
That
people
sounds horrible.
somewhere.
The dog's like a golden retriever
Dogs,
tail.
yeah.
Oh, that's terrifying. I'm visualizing that. That's like a really terrifying thing.
What was it about your grandfather that you admired so much?
Well, yeah, he just really loved people in like the deepest, most genuine way, and he was hilarious. And I don't have a sense of humor, and I wish I did. Because he could
Oh, really? I
yeah.
noticed.
No, I mean, he'd like come into a room and just light it up. He'd make everybody so much happy, like genuinely. So when he used to come pick me up at school, like all my friends, they would leave all the other cars and they'd flock the car because he would just like, he'd tell like he was just so like loving and charismatic and kind and funny. And the interesting thing is, apparently he was so much more so that he had a stroke before I knew him. And that was like him, like 2 notches down. And so I can only imagine, but the amount that people loved him because of how much he loved them was like completely unmatched. And I think at the end of the day, that's worth more than anything. It's actually, I don't know if anybody knows this other than the people had Jefferson with like the other week, Jeffersonian dinner, but when he passed, he did leave like a small will. And so I had $50,000 for my grandpa. And I thought really hard, like, how to use that. Because he obviously had startups, and I had debt. And so this would be a great thing to pay off debt with. But I decided not to. I used the $50,000 to take people out to meals and to treat people to meals. Because that's, like, what he was just so generous in spirit and loved being around people so much. And so you definitely aspire to be like him.
Well, I see a lot of him in you, from what I know of you.
He was short too.
He was short too? I didn't see anything. That was totally you. So
really short.
My very last question, because we don't have a lot of time, is I absolutely see a lot of what you described in your grandfather in you. But what's next for you? What's next for you, and therefore next for the community that you inspire?
Whoa. Oh, this is live streaming? What's next? Well, I mean, like in the immediate next term or the long term?
What's next for Daniel? What's Daniel going to help this community do that they aren't doing, or the next community that you get involved in?
Well, the second part of that question is the comment. It's really interesting. There's like this quote: "Ask not what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive." Because what the world needs are more people who come alive. And I think I am the most spoiled person I know, because I think that I found the intersection of both those things, that there's almost a false dichotomy there that assumes you can't have both. And I feel like Unreasonable is where I come alive, and it's where we can have the most amount of impact in the world. And so there is no next in terms of that. For me, Unreasonable is a lifelong company, and I hope that exists for hundreds of years. This is kind of it. But in terms of what's next there, we did a really hard thing at the start of this year. We had a hard look in the mirror and realized that as a company we were optimized to run world-class 2-week programs. We were getting feedback from entrepreneurs that was saying it's the best experience they've ever had in terms of any type of program like this. And that felt good. But then we realized, like, what the hell are we doing if all we're doing is amazing 2-week programs? We're not doing anything. Had to reorg the company, and so I had to say goodbye to 7 people on the team. We're a tight team. That was brutal. like horrible.
Yeah.
But in the end, we wanted to reorg so that we could be optimized to ensure that we're the best organization in the world at giving entrepreneurs like the ones here an unfair advantage into perpetuity. Like the 2 weeks is the spark, perpetuity is the flame, and that's fucking hard. Like I don't know a network that's done that, and that's what's next for us is to ensure that for all the entrepreneurs who are part of Unreasonable that this is trajectory shifting in a fundamental way, but that they feel this for the rest of their lives. And I think we're going to get there. And so that's absolutely, I mean, that's a forever journey.
Yeah.
There's so much more. Hang on, there's so many more other things, but I probably can't go into them. No.
Well, maybe one thing about you specifically. So this is exciting with regards to Unreasonable because it is a very, very special community, and being able to bridge the kind of short-term value of these programs with kind of the long-term impact is incredible. What about you specifically?
Beyond Unreasonable. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that I'm in a slightly different posture to life. I had about 10 years where I was completely obsessed. The only thing in my life was Unreasonable, and in family I would say, but that was about it. I literally nothing else. And then I met Leticia, who's my girlfriend.
Yes.
Who's not here, which sucks, but I'm gonna see her tomorrow night. Yeah.
And if any of you don't follow her on Instagram, not only does she post beautiful things, but she's always raving about Daniel.
Really?
Yes.
Hey, I don't go on Instagram. It's horrible. Thank you, Lex. But she showed me that there's more to life, and that actually. This isn't why I'm in the relationship by any means, but I've learned that being in a relationship can actually help you become a better leader in terms of how you show up in life. And so I think that what's next for me is probably dropping into a posture of a much more well-rounded leader. This program is amazing because I'm not running this program, right? Like the team's running this program under Coleman's leadership, and this is the first time that I've ever done that, and I had no issue with this whatsoever. But Coleman was freaking out, I think, a little bit, and I was like, "No, I know you could run it just as well, if not better, or at least in a different way, but in a different way, better." And so I think the next phase for me is kind of how do we master culture and team so that we can all be liberated with. Trusting the quality of every team member in the company so that we can all be liberated to not just live and breathe Unreasonable. And I think that's for me, but that's for everybody in the company.
Well, I think that's a really inspiring note to end on. So we've got kind of the two sides. We've got the enthusiastic puppy that will always be there when you come back from the bathroom or come back from your next venture. But you worked hard to earn that affection. And then we've also got the inspiring leader who knows when to step back, when to make sure that their life is balanced enough. To be successful.
Is learning how to do that.
Learning how to do that, but can never be trained.
Yes.
That we know. So, thank you very much, everyone.